Great, members. Thank you very much for coming back. There's always one who's late, isn't there? And it was me. No, it was me. I've only just got in. Okay, so we have said that there are certain applications we won't determine before 2:00, but we did have one remaining one this morning, which was in Broadclist, and I'll find it in a minute. Agenda item 10, isn't it? And that is page 130. Here we go. So this is 241154 VAR, and this is for Persimmon Homes to vary one of the conditions of the Construction and Environment Management Plan. So who's actually doing that? Was that you, Liam? Yeah. Okay.
So good afternoon, members. This application is before members as the recommendation to approve is contrary to views expressed by the Parish Council. This application seeks to vary Condition 13, Construction and Environment Management Plan of Application 17/1019/MOUT, which granted permission for the demolition of existing buildings and development of the site to provide up to 900 dwellings. The amendment seeks to extend construction hours on Saturday afternoon from the time of determination to 31st of December 2024. From the 1st of January 2025, the working hours would revert to the previously approved hours. By way of an update, and as this is a live development site, a number of additional conditions have been discharged since the report was published, and therefore conditions 19 and 31, as set out in the report, would need to be updated to reflect this, and what the additional wording is shown later in this presentation. The site is known as land north of Tyburn Lane, Clisshoniton, or is known as Mosshane. The site extends 43.3 hectares in area, and at present comprises of a mix of residential development in accordance with the outline application and agricultural land separated into the remaining 3 parcels. The site forms part of the strategic mixed-use development at Redhays / land north of Black Horse Lane under Strategy 13 of the local plan. This is the most up-to-date phasing plan of the development, showing the location of dwellings, sports pitches in the pink below, land for the school in yellow, and an open and play space sort of around the development. Phase 1, which is here, is fully occupied. Phase 2 is in construction. The country park, phase 3, and the infrastructure, which is shown in purple, have all been approved. And then the remaining phases 4 and 5 and the sports pitches are due to be submitted in the next couple of weeks. So this is an aerial image of development at Tyburn looking towards the east, with the location of the science park in the bottom corner, just where I am on the image. The Sky Park and Logistics Park to the north, A30 and the railway line here. In terms of this is the whole of Tyburn, and shown in red is an outline of Mosshane. So this is what this site is, rather than the other areas which fall under separate applications. And again, this is the current progress of phase 2 development from July 2024. And then this shows the site looking south with phase 1 here, which is now fully occupied, and phase 2 in here, which is under construction. And you can see the existing parcels of agricultural land to be developed. So as said before, this application seeks to vary condition 13 of the outline application, and this condition requires the submission and approval of a KEMP for each phase of development, as well as a number of restrictions. Restriction B sets out the construction hours for the development, as you can see on the left-hand side of your screen. The application seeks to increase working hours on a Saturday from 1:00 to 4:30, but from 2 till 4:30 works would be internal dwelling works only, and there'll be no use of power tools. The increase in working hours would also be a temporary measure from the date of the decision to the end of this year, and then from January 1st, the working hours would revert back to the previously approved hours of 8 till 1 on a Saturday. The changes to condition are shown in bold on the right-hand side, where you can see point B has the amended hours, and then point C sets what would it revert back to from January the 1st. The applicant has set out reasons why the temporary extension of working hours is required, which relate to the timely delivery of housing, infrastructure delivery, and connection to E.ON for district heating, and factors such as weather, archaeology, and staffing have also led to a delay in their build programme for phase 2 of development. The additional time granted would allow for additional external works and dwellings to be completed internally, to release contractors to progress on with the build programme and infrastructure delivery, and to try and avoid any further setbacks. The main considerations for this relate to traffic, noise and disturbance. In relation to traffic, it is envisaged that staff members and contractors on site would remain on site rather than swap over, so traffic would remain as already they're coming in the morning. The delivery hours would remain as existing, and the applicant has not proposed to amend those under this condition. And no objections were received from Devon County Council Highways or National Highways on the impact of local strategic road network. The KEMP still requires the applicant to manage other matters within the wording, such as air and water quality and lighting, and they would still have to manage that going forward. The restriction on internal works between 2 and 4:30 to dwellings, and the use of and the control that we would not allow them to use power tools would help to manage the level of noise and vibrations for existing and proposed residents. And the District Council's Environmental Health Officer does not raise any objections to the application. So in weighing up sort of the harm and the additional hours and subject to the restrictions in the proposed conditions, officers considered that the temporary extension to working hours would not result in any significant harm to existing or proposed neighbouring properties in terms of noise, traffic and disturbance, and a benefit of the proposal would arise from the completion of additional housing on a strategic development site in a more timely fashion. Therefore, the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions and a variation of the Section 106 to allow for the obligations in the original outline application to be transferred to this variation of conditions. And as noted, there are 2 conditions to be updated, and the change in wording is shown in yellow, and these are inserted to recognise that these conditions have now been discharged. This is a multi-phase development, so each condition potentially requires to, or would need to be discharged more than once on a number of them, so hence why for phase 2, these conditions have now been discharged, and that the wording now reflects that. So yeah, any questions on that?
Okay, committee, any questions? Councillor Hall. Oh. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, absolutely. So sorry. Yes, we need to hear from the applicant, George Turgoose, on behalf of Joshua Stevenson. Thank you. You have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, members. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today about our Section 73 application at Mosshain. To provide you with some context to this application, Persimmon Homes are currently building out 900 homes to the west end of the district of Mosshain. To date, we have built out and sold 389 new homes. However, in the last 12 months, we have faced a multitude of challenges which have culminated in the need to submit this Section 73 application to extend our working hours on Saturdays from 8 AM to 1 PM to the following: 8 AM till 4:30 PM, but with the caveat that the extension period between 2 and 4:30 will be for internal works only. These works will be limited to less intrusive works such as painting, decorating, fitting of kitchens, electrical installations and plumbing. and this extension will only be until the end of 2024, at which point it will revert to the currently approved working hours. You may be wondering, why do we need this extension and why for such a short period of time? Well, due to unforeseen circumstances at the beginning of this phase, our second phase at Moss Home, we have faced a number of setbacks, including adverse weather conditions, shortages in site management personnel, in addition to other key contractors such as carpenters, bricklayers, and kitchen and carpet fitters. These have affected us throughout the year, but single-handedly, our biggest delay has come from archaeology. As some of you may be aware, following the trial trenching across the site, our archaeologists found a Roman sword, a spatha, from the late Roman Empire. One of only a handful ever found in the UK. This led to a significant expansion on the trenching across the whole site, which held up development for 8 months. No other major discoveries were made, and the findings were put down to being an anomaly, most likely an overzealous collector of ancient artifacts. This has resulted in significant delays, and by extending construction hours, we believe this will allow the previously lost time to be recovered, ensuring that we deliver much needed private and affordable housing, thus supporting EDDC's objectives and fulfilling our collective obligations to provide adequate housing for the local community. We fully understand and respect the community's concerns about noise and increased traffic. To address these concerns, we propose to limit the extended working hours exclusively to the aforementioned internal tasks. These activities produce minimal noise compared to structural construction, thereby reducing potential disturbances. We are committed to enforcing these restrictions and maintaining open communication with you and the community to prevent any issues. We also intend to implement further traffic management strategies to minimize disruption. Our aim is to manage and schedule deliveries effectively to prevent congestion and ensure the community experiences minimal inconvenience this year. We appreciate the community's ongoing patience and understanding as we work to bring this phase to completion. We'd like to reassure you the extended hours are a temporary measure till the end of 2024. And we remain committed to working closely with you, EDDC, and the residents to minimize impact while delivering essential housing to local people. We are confident that with your support, we can address both the Council's strategic objectives, your concerns, and the community's expectations. Persimmon Homes is committed to delivering quality homes for local people in East Devon. And to that end, I implore that you approve this application to allow us the additional time to build these much needed homes for local people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for that explanation. I feel for the archaeologists not finding anything else. That must have been really frustrating for them. Okay, questions? Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. They're saying no power tools, and yet there's a list of jobs they want to do, and most of that involves using power tools. So how can we know that when they say they're not going to use power tools, that actually, oh, just need a power tool? You know, painting doesn't need a power tool. It needs a brush and a bucket, a tin of paint. But fitting kitchens tends to involve noisy tools and doing, you know, and there's all sorts of other things that start needing power tools. If we are sticking strictly to the thing of no power tools, I wouldn't have a problem. The other question is about deliveries, because I can't see any reason why you should need to have a delivery. If you can't have it in the morning, then there's no reason to have it in the afternoon. If you can do it at normal times. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, Councillor Bloxham.
Yeah, thank you. Being ward member for Cranbrook, I'm very familiar with Kemp and working out of hours. And my question is, what measures are being put in place for residents to be able to contact somebody at the time when the noise or the disturbance is actually happening? Because we get that quite a lot on a Saturday afternoon. There's nobody to contact, and by the time you contact them on Monday, the problem's gone and nobody can give you an answer. And it may be subcontractors that are doing it, and I'm not aiming this at this particular developer, but it's generic across developers. So I'd like somebody to answer the question: what measures are put in place for residents to deal with complaints? Who do they contact at the time these things are happening?
Okay, good point. Any other questions? Okay, officers, can we respond?
So in relation to the first question about power tools, obviously we've stipulated in the condition that there is no use of power tools, and Persimmon are aware of that and they have agreed to that. So it would be for them to ensure that they are complying with that condition. I appreciate they listed jobs that they could be doing, but we have stipulated in the condition that there are no use of power tools, and that was a decision taken by officers. I think the environmental health officer just wanted to be made aware of potentially when power tools were going to be used, and to detail when and where that was. But I think as officers we've gone a step sort of further than that, so there should be no use of power tools in the afternoon, and so work sort of painting and decorating, that you can, there will be other things that they can do without use of power tools, but that would sort of be the things that you might find typical of sort of DIY, or what a householder could do on a Saturday afternoon. Those sorts of jobs that were internal, and giving the sort of time of year and that we're moving in autumn winter, the chances are that windows and doors of neighbouring properties are going to be shut anyway, so that should also help mitigate the noise. In terms of delivery hours, the delivery hours are set in the current Kemp at 8 till 1 on a Saturday. There's no, the applicant has not sought to change that under this application, so they will remain as originally approved. And in terms of who to contact, in terms of if hours go beyond that, or there are concerns of noise, the site will have a site manager who will be your first point of contact. The Kemp will also includes details of the people at Persimmon who can be contacted, and as well as the District Council's environmental health team can be contacted to be called out if there are breaches of hours or specific concerns of noise.
Okay, thank you. I think we also heard Mr. Turgoose say that that would be strictly controlled and adhered to. Yeah, I think you said that you would be making sure that contractors do comply with those conditions.
Yeah, all the jobs mentioned as the internal works would be compliant with the condition and not using the power tools, yeah.
And would you be able to give local residents a number that they can contact for a site manager, perhaps?
That would be something we could do. Yeah, we could provide local residents with contact information in the case they need to.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, further questions? Yep, good. Okay, Councillor Chamberlain.
Thank you. As ward member for that area, would it be possible for the ward members to have that contact number given to them? Because we are highly likely to be contacted by the residents within our wards about it, so at least we can pass that on should the need arise, please. Thank you.
Okay, so add the ward members on as well. And their contact details obviously are on the East End website. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chair. I know it's not a tool, but one of the tools that the people use is a very loud radio very often. And that can be very disturbing, especially if there's a window open. Could that be controlled in any way?
Yeah, I'm with you there. Yeah, particularly the choice of station sometimes. I don't know. Well, yeah, obviously if they were playing my music, there'd be no problem. I don't know. Is that something that can be...
I'm not sure whether we can restrict the volumes or radio station, but I know the developers will be under the I think it's called like Careful or Considerate Contractors program, and therefore will have they will be having to comply with those sort of not necessarily regulations, but those the things set out in there in terms of noise and disturbance. And I suppose if it is loud radio, residents could contact the site manager and ask them to turn it down or change it, if they felt that they needed to.
I think perhaps if it's internal works only, they won't need the volumes quite as high as they sometimes do when they're all working outside and they seem to think everybody should be in earshot, including everybody in the surrounding area. Okay, any further questions, committee? In that case, we can go into debate. Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. This seems a fairly reasonable thing to ask. The quicker they get the job done, the quicker the site will be quiet. So really, it's a matter of taking a little bit now and then gaining a little bit later. Also, I think if it, as it's been pointed out, it is winter up until December the 1st, they're likely to be inside. Certainly for the afternoon, even power tools, a screwdriver, you don't hear it, which is the main things that kitchen fitters, occasionally a chop saw, which might be a little bit noisy. But if it's inside a house and the people are inside the house, and of course, if these houses were occupied, people would be making noise in them anyway. So I really think I'm amazed that they have to come and we have to debate this. But anyway, we're here. So I would like to approve it as per officer recommendations as soon as you're ready to take a.
Okay, so that's a proposal and seconded by Councillor Bailey. Okay, Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. Knowing some of the new build houses, you could be living in one house, a semi, and people working next door, and you can hear straight through the walls. They're not soundproof like the older ones. I've had friends in Otley from houses that were built there, and you could almost hear what's being said next door. So I think it is really important. It's not just about somebody the other side of the site. It can be the house next door who's having to put up with this. So having the radio and singing out a tune with the radio and all that sort of things that go on, the amount of times certainly through the summer maybe, but they're up on top of the scaffolding singing away, and you think, well, at least could you get your tune right first before you start annoying everyone else with your noise? But these really are issues. Thank you, Chair.
I think, given that it's the whole site, I don't think there's going to be somebody working next door to a house that's already occupied. I think the nearest occupied house is some distance away. I think that's correct, Liam, isn't it?
So in terms of existing residents, obviously, yeah, that there'll be the ones who are already living there in the rest of Tive Barn, but obviously as the site is being developed, people will be moving into it. But in terms of their internal works, that is on the latter end of the build programme. They do the internal works and then they'll move to external landscaping, things like that. So by time, I think it'll be rare for a pair of semi-detached, one to be occupied and one still having its internal fit out. There should hopefully be a build programme of them moving on and then being occupied following. So hopefully, yeah, we wouldn't find a case where we right next door to internal works.
Yep. Okay. Any other comments from members before we go to a vote? No? Okay. Well, we have a proposer and a seconder. So we can go to a vote on this one. It seems reasonable to me. I mean, it's time limited, both in terms of the hours of the day and how long this actually goes on until the end of December. And we've got various conditions about the kind of work that'll be carried out in the extended hours. So personally, yeah, I don't have a problem with it. So we can go to a vote. All those, sorry, Kim.
Sorry, I think it is important that the telephone number is provided, because I understand all those reasons that you've said, but I think the ward members, having experienced it myself, it is important that there is a telephone number provided, at least to ward members, to be able to deal with it.
Okay, well, we have an agent here, so perhaps they can make a note of that, it's really important that ward members, you're right, you're often the first point of contact, especially in that area, I know, Kim. So if we can, yeah,
Happy to make
sure
that part of the condition, Chair, if you want.
yeah, we could add a condition requiring that nearby residents and ward members are provided with contact details. Or as part of the decision notice, maybe. Have you been, I know you've got to do it on the left, Liam.
Yes, it's not something necessarily that we would condition, but I know I'm in regular contact with the ward members and meet with the ward members and developers every 8 weeks. So I'm happy to take that forward, and I can email Persimmon this afternoon to say, could you send over your first point of contact for the site, so the site manager as well as an in-house sort of officer as well, or colleague, member of staff from Persimmon.
Okay. In that case, we can now go to a vote. So all those in favour? Peace and harmony all round. Let's hope it's the same for the residents of Tithe Barn. Okay. We'll move straight on to our next application, which is agenda item 10. 11, sorry. Yeah, we've done that one, haven't we? That's what we've done. Yeah, we're doing item 12 first. This is land at 22 Underhill Crescent, Lympstone, planning application 230674 FUL. And Lynn Schwen is in place already. Wonderful. So we have an objector, Adrian Woolacott. Yep, he's here. Okay, if you'd like to come up to the microphone, we'll hear from you. Sorry, we've got to present the report first. I'm getting myself. Yeah, well, I'm double negativing myself. It's a kind of okay.
Hello, good afternoon, members and public. This, oh, it's not showing the screen. Is that that? Or is that? Okay. Right. This application relates to a site on the southern side of Lympstone. It's just beyond the built-up area boundary. It's the site outlined in red. The built-up area boundary actually runs along the line there. And it's for the development of 2 houses served off Underhill Close, accessed up the top there. It's adjacent to an existing property known as Highfield and is to the rear of these properties in Underhill Crescent. The application is for 2 detached houses. That's not a great plan, is it? Basically, in line with the existing house of Highfield, the site is located in the Green Wedge and is, as I say, it's outside of the built-up area boundary. But it also forms part of a site which has recently been to the Strategic Planning Committee as a preferred site for the development of 8 houses, part of the development of 8 houses in Lympstone. The whole of the allocation in the Strategic Planning Committee includes the blue area as well, with a further 6 houses being proposed to be served off Underhill Close, with the removal of number 22. So this application seeks development for 2 detached houses, 4-bedroomed houses. That's an access picture. So that's showing that they can provide appropriate access. They're All right, so the main elevations would front onto the rear of Underhill Crescent. Sorry, that's the front elevations, which would front onto Underhill Crescent, with the rear facing southwards towards open countryside. That's an existing house called Highfield next door. So the layout is fairly typical, living accommodation on the ground floor with bedrooms and bathrooms, etc. on the first floor. The layout. The site is relatively well screened to the east by an existing hedge. There is some planting to the south, although the southern boundary is fairly open. This is looking sort of east across the site with the hedge boundary there. It's a relatively level site. That's looking back towards, that's 22 Underhill Crescent, with the other properties in the crescent behind the tree and the fence. More views, the properties in Underhill Crescent are here. And again. And again. So that's sort of looking northwards towards the existing properties on the edge of Limpstone. So in terms of the setting, the wider setting, there's a series of photographs that basically the site is in here, and then the next series of photographs follow the road from the nearest public access vantage points. So there's a whole series, and basically, right, that's looking across the allotments. The actual site is behind this property here. The allotments in Highcliffe Road. Again, looking back, working our way down the road, down towards the estuary. The estuary is down on the right. Again, looking back across the allotments. This is from the end of the cycle path where it joins Sowden Lane. Yeah, Sowden Lane. So I don't know if I can zoom in, but this tree here is at the bottom of Highfield, which is a property that's already existing next door to the site. And if you can zoom in, and I could before, and I'm not quite sure how to there. That one? Oh, okay. Okay. I don't know if you can make out, but basically the ridge of Highfield is in there. That's a tree at the bottom of the garden, and the application site would be in here, with the properties being slightly lower, at a lower level than the existing property there. Again, following on round, down Sowden Lane, and we're coming up to the edge of the public footpath, which extends up to, I believe it's Church Lane, or through to Church Road. Right, so from here, this is on the public footpath. This is an existing new property called, I believe, Blue Haze. The application site's in here, and that's Highfield, where the tree was that you could just see at the end of the garden. Again, looking across, the application site's behind this vegetation. More views of that. Right, so that's the existing development. So we're seeking permission for they're seeking permission for 2 dwellings. It's a site that, as I say, forms part of the new strategic allocation. And it's adjacent to both the existing property Highfield, but also to an application site which has been granted permission where there was a car park, an unauthorized or originally authorised car park that has now got permission to be redeveloped for a new dwelling. It was granted on appeal, with the inspector finding that there was no visual impact arising from the development of this site, which is a site adjacent. I'll go back to the original site plan. Sorry. Finding there would be no visual impact. So this area here has been granted planning permission for the development of a new dwelling, And the inspector found that from the south, there was no visual impact arising from this. And it's considered that effectively these properties would be seen within the context of the existing development, and that which has approval would also be seen in context of the existing development in Underhill Crescent. So in terms of amenity, there's considered to be sufficient distance between the proposed dwellings and the rear of the existing dwellings in Underhill, with a minimum distance of 27 metres between the two. And given the existing boundary screening and proposed boundary screening, it's not considered there would be any significant residential impact on the occupiers of these. I mean, clearly their outlook will change. The relationship with the existing field, which is obviously vacant, will change. But it's not considered that in planning terms there would be any reasonable reasons for this to be refused. There's no highway safety concerns or other technical objections to it, and therefore the application is recommended for approval.
Thank you. So we can now hear from the public speakers. So Mr. Woolacott, we'll hear from you now. Have you, I don't know. They would have to be submitted in advance, I think. Yeah, sorry.
If you could put your microphone on, where it says 19. Yeah.
Right. Sorry, I find this quite difficult because we're good friends with the applicants, but I feel obliged to object to the development as it stands. I'm conscious I've only got 3 minutes, so I'll try and go to the point. Habitable rooms within this proposed development will look directly into the currently secluded rear gardens of numbers 14, 16, 18 and 20 Underhill Crescent. More worryingly, the development will also give views directly into the rear ground floor reception rooms of these properties. These rooms, being at the rear of the houses, are exclusively used for everyday living and recreation. In addition, the first floor bedrooms of numbers 14 and 20 are in direct line of sight of the proposed new homes. This appears contrary to policy D1 of the council's local plan. The committee report published last week supports this application as it stands and in part refers to other nearby approved developments to justify this position. Blue Haze is a new house, but it was built to replace a pre-existing chalet bungalow on land that was already within the Green Wedge, so it differs to this application in many respects. Land to the south of Underhill Crescent, referenced APP 240725 VAR, shows approval for construction of one single-storey, flat-roofed, low-level dwelling with a first-floor annex confined to the southwest corner. The long-running documented history of this application shows that the planning officer has been at great pains to address the overlooking and privacy concerns of the existing residents, of which there are two. The delegated report in relation to this devotes 5 paragraphs to the issues of privacy in relation to 8 Underhill Close, and another 3 paragraphs in relation to the privacy of 3 Underhill Close. The report goes on to list 4 clear, precise conditions to mitigate against the overlooking of 2 existing properties. In brief, these conditions involve a balcony, condition 9, where a balcony screen has to be imposed, condition 10, a ban on a void space being used as a first floor living space, condition 11, a ban on the windows in the northern elevation, condition 12, a ban on the flat roof being used as a balcony or amenity space. In each case, the reasons given for these conditions are to protect the occupiers of adjoining properties from overlooking and loss of privacy in accordance with policy D1, designed local distinctiveness of East Devon Local Plan 2013 to 2031. These conditions form part of the formal planning consent expressly imposed by this authority due to privacy concerns. I find it hard to understand how and why different standards are being applied to developments that are less than 60 metres apart. One large single-storey, low-profile, flat-roofed home, partially overlooking 2 existing homes, results in planning approval with 4 clear, precise conditions intended to protect privacy. Privacy concerns over a pair of 2-storey dwellings overlooking ground floor rooms, first floor bedrooms and gardens of 4 existing properties.
That's 3 minutes.
Is simply dismissed. I'm almost there. This questionable and inconsistent approach seems unfair and suggests error in the decision-making process, which could lead to the council failing to comply with its own policy in relation to section D1. It is especially important that the council make the correct decision in relation to this application, as the rest of number 22 Underhill Crescent and its adjoining 2 paddocks have already been offered for future housing. It therefore follows that decisions made with regard to this application could be a precedent for future development and is likely to affect ourselves and another 8 to 10 dwellings into the Crescent and Church Path. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next we have Susie Culhane on behalf of the Parish Council. Is she here? No? Okay. In that case, we'll move on to the applicant, Chris Wintrell.
Good afternoon, councillors. This application relates to a site that is enclosed on 3 sides, west, north and east, by residential properties and gardens. At the southern boundary, there is a substantial earth bank and hedge about 3 metres high, which forms a natural boundary between the built-up area of Limestone and the coastal protection area and Exmouth to the south. The site is not isolated in the countryside and should be considered as an infill that would relate well to the pattern and housing development at the village edge without harming the character and appearance of the green wedge. The site is approximately level, well drained and not subject to flooding. It is proposed that all rainwater runoff from the house roofs, driveways and parking areas will be retained within the site via infiltration and rain garden planting. The site is accessed via a private driveway to the northwest, under which is located a foul water sewer connection. Assessment of the sewer connection, together with correspondence with South West Water earlier this year, indicated that the drainage network could accommodate foul water drainage from the proposed 2-house development. Currently, planning on the site is subject to the requirements of the East Devon Local Plan and the Lympston Neighbourhood Plan. Strategy 7 of the East Devon Local Plan permits development where it is in accordance with the Lympston Neighbourhood Plan and where it does not harm the landscape, amenity and environmental qualities within which it is located. Within the current Lympston Neighbourhood Plan, there are 11 policy requirements applicable to this planning application, all of which I believe have been complied with. At the East Devon Strategic Planning meeting held on the 3rd of September, the site identified as Lympston 01, of which this planning application forms approximately a third, was identified as a preferable, sustainable allocation site for up to 8 dwellings. This preferred allocation clearly indicates that the development of the site is deemed as acceptable, fully sustainable, located within the Lympston village amongst other houses and close to local services. Finally, I would refer members to the last 3 paragraphs of the executive summary of your officer's report, which state, due to the sustainable location of the site, the need for new housing, and the resolution to promote the site as a preferred allocation in the emerging local plan, the principle of development of the site is acceptable. The proposed dwellings are considered to be acceptable in terms of layout, scale, and appearance, and would not result in any significant harm to the character and appearance of the area or the green wedge designation to justify refusal of the application. The proposal is considered to be acceptable in terms of its impact on residential amenity and parking provision, such that on balance it is recommended for approval. That's the last 3 paragraphs of your officer's report.
That's 3 minutes.
Right, finally, there are no technical reasons why the scheme should not go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've moved to the ward members. Councillor Young, did you want to speak? Yeah, I've got to ask you if you have any declarations of interest. Could somebody switch the microphone off up there? Thank you very much.
No, I haven't got any declaration of interest. Regarding this planning application, now the site is within the emerging local plan allocations of sites. I withdraw my recommendation for refusal.
Well, you don't have to, you know.
I know, but no.
Okay. Yeah, we've had this discussion already today, but the fact that it's part of a strategic allocation doesn't necessarily mean we have to accept this particular application. Councillor Ingham, any declarations of interest?
No declarations of interest.
And do you wish to speak?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
So could we put up the location plan, please? So you recommend refusal? Okay. So thank you, Chair. So a potted history of the site. You've seen photographs of Highfield. That's the property to the west of the red shape, yeah? And you heard that the built-up area boundary lies north of that, on the back gardens of those properties of the Crescent, yes? And the reason that doesn't include Highfield. Highfield was there first, okay, way before the built-up area boundary. And that built-up area boundary is where, the Exmouth, Lympstone Green wedge goes, and that's the northern perimeter of that. So I would say to you, the reasons for refusal, which have worked historically for land there and adjacent, is that it's outside the built-up area boundary, and when that green wedge was set up, though it's not included in the current definition, if you were to stand on the southern perimeter of the blue and red square, and if you could see, looking south, you got a beautiful view down to Exmouth and the estuary, looking across to just north of Cockhood. Of course, you've seen that there's a hedge in the way that prevents you from doing that, but hedges are easily removed. So that's why the idea was not to build on that ridge of that hill, and that's why the green wedge was originally taken right up there, not just the fields south that we're looking at. Then you had East Devon District Council needed a temporary car park, which is immediately to the west of Highfield there, the field there, not outlined, yes. And that was in place for a few years. East Devon dithered and dithered and dithered, as you can understand they do, and they did not purchase that property, and then someone else put in a planning application, which you heard about, for a bungalow. So that's where the bungalow has permission, where the red spot is in that field there. So that was granted at appeal by, I would say, an incompetent inspector at appeal, who decided not to listen or to probably bother reading the history of objections from our planning officers, and appeal was granted. So that really does seriously undermine already that boundary, doesn't it, as it's been explained. And Highfield does exist. And ordinarily, I would say to you, two wrongs don't make a right. But unfortunately, perhaps they do today, because strategic planning, as you've heard, have sanctioned allocation of that land for development. So if this one doesn't succeed, you know it will in the future. So with great reluctance, I'm not objecting to this one. I'm not going to ask you to approve it. I'm just saying it's a sad day where we've started to undermine our own policies that have worked for 30 years, not at the behest of our planning officers who fought long and hard to prevent that temporary car park being allocated. But that's where we are, so it's up to you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ingham. Okay, we can now invite questions. Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. If we can go back to the side view, side elevations. That's is it the one that, the one that includes the bungalow in front. I'm just concerned about how accurate that, that's the one. Yeah, that's fine, that where before. Because it's showing, it seems to be very level. And I'm not sure how accurate is that positioning of the bungalow at the same level, because I've done delivery of leaflets around Underhill, and that is a slope. And I mean, I know it gets fairly level at the top, but is that bungalow actually at the same level as the, I don't know if anyone can answer that, the actual same level as the house or the houses? Or is there any drop between them? Because they are pretty much the same, I think. And then it drops beyond that. Yeah, you go around the front and it's a very steep driveway. And I know you go on the side view on Google Street Scene and the brick wall is dropping all the way down. Only a brick height each about every 4 feet, but it's, I mean, everything's on a, so that's one thing I was concerned about. There's a comment in the public comments about right of way, and somebody else says they own a piece of land you have to drive over to get to. I don't know if that's an issue.
No, not a planning issue. It could be between the applicant and whoever says they own it. But in terms of planning, it doesn't actually matter who owns the site, and rights of way are not our concern. In terms of the plan, that is a section, and we have to assume that it's been properly surveyed and it is actually level, or more or less level. It means there's a very slight slope down to the right. I know I've cycled up Underhill. I know how steep it is, to my cost. But I think it does level out at the top, and yeah, we can see there we're looking at a fairly level site. The issue of overlooking has been mentioned, and I wonder if we could deal with that one. Any further questions from committee members? Councillor Hall.
Sorry to be pedantic, but can I just check some of the technicalities of this application? I don't see, as per our validation checklist, a completed SIL form. So can I confirm if this is SIL liable or whether they're claiming an exemption? Also, semi-related, in the application form, it states a BNG exemption of minor development. Now, I've heard of existing old planning applications being exempt, as are variation of conditions below the threshold, householders, self-build and custom, but I've not heard of minor. Can I just check that, please?
Okay. Any other questions before I get officers to respond? No, okay.
Okay, so on the matter of the BNG, I think one of the key issues is when the application was submitted. So we're just going to check that. Just to give a bit of context to the questions that were raised about overlooking and also the comments that were raised by one of the speakers of talking about the differences between, or comparing this with the scheme which has been consented and the sort of level of commentary that was submitted about overlooking. So I'm just trying to skip, to the plan. So you can see, so the consented scheme that was allowed on appeal, sorry, this mouse is jumping around, was in this side. And it's just to put it in context, it's referred to as a bungalow. It's a very large house, a very large house. The length of the house is probably right across this site. It's part single story, part 2-story. It's not a bungalow. And the amount that is the first floor is equivalent to the width of the neighbouring house. But the dwelling itself is more than double the width of this house. It's a very large house. I'm just wanting to allay any thoughts that it's a modest bungalow because it's far from that. And the properties that the officers were considering is this one here and this one here. And as you can see, the distance to, so the house that was approved was in line, pretty much in line with this one here. As you can see, these two houses are quite a lot closer to the common boundary than these houses here. So the separation distance does make quite a difference in terms of what's deemed an acceptable distance for overlooking. And that has resulted in the officer's judgment that there is enough separation distance together with topography to make this acceptable. And also the big glazed balconies, big windows are all looking southwards. They're not looking to the neighbouring properties. So for those reasons, the officer view is that the relationship with the existing properties is acceptable. I will just refer to Ms. Schwen.
The application was received in March, so therefore it wouldn't have been subject to the BNG, pardon me, BNG regulations.
So in terms of sill liability, it is still liable. It's a dwelling. It's not in one of the sill exempt areas, so it will be still liable. Whether or not it's a self-build that they would then latterly claim a self-build exemption on, I don't know, but it's liable. Yes.
Okay, and I think within the plot, if we can get the plan, the sort of layout plan, I think they are set quite far back within that plot as well. So there's a greater distance between them. Yeah, there. So yeah, we can see that there's a fair distance between those and the houses behind. Okay, any other questions? Nope. In that case, we'll go into debate. Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, again, we depart from the local plan. Does happen. Third time today, I think. I've listened to the speakers, etc., and I understand the fear of overlooking, but I think looking at the other houses there, quick calculation with the distances, etc., you know, this is going to be further apart than the houses in Underhill Crescent. I know they're going to be facing each other, not backing onto each other, but certainly there was Blue Haze was mentioned, that there was no windows in the north face. Well, that's because the north face of that house is right abutting the house next door, and obviously that would cause overlooking. So again, having listened to the ward members, both ward members, saying they've got no, because of the new local plan, even though it doesn't carry much weight, we all know it's coming. It just makes sense to allow this, even if it is contrary to the local plan. I just wonder if, taking Matt Hall's or Councillor Hall's point, whether we could impose, because this is jumping the gun, impose a little bit of BNG more than they're offering at the moment. I know there is a thing saying that we're going to agree some bits in there, but are there more things we could add to that because they are jumping the gun? I think they're already mentioning bird and bat boxes. My pet thing of bees, whatever, bee bricks. These are pennies when you're putting up houses, and I just think that if you put them in now, it's cheaper, easier to do that. But I'm not the expert on this, but I know there are other experts around the table that might have other suggestions that we add to this. But otherwise, I would recommend support when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Gazzard.
Thank you, Chair. You know, once again, this is only my view, and I might have misinterpreted everything I've heard. But it seems to me that yet again we've got one hand tied behind our back again now. Strategic planning are saying that this site could have more houses on it. So, and the ward members are obviously, in my view, they would like to reject it. And I don't think we can reject it, because if we did, obviously, when strategic planning put their numbers forward, as they have done, we can have more houses on this site than what has already been recommended. Yeah. And I just think, and I'm probably totally wrong, but I just think that at the moment, no, we seem to be banging our head against a brick wall, because we'd like to maybe reject applications, but feel that we can't because of the strategic planning committee with the recommendations that they're coming up with. So reluctantly, if there is a proposal for acceptance, I would second it, Chair, reluctantly.
Okay, well, I mean, you don't have to be too reluctant, Steve. I mean, I think there is a difference. Firstly, strategic planning are only considering the principle of development. And I think we can accept the principle of development here. It's in a sustainable location, a service village, close to railway station, etc. But we can still object to the particular design or layout or whatever. I think the 8 houses that were quoted is for the full extent of all of those back gardens. I think there's 3 of them, 3 areas behind those houses. So it wouldn't be just that particular one. And I don't think we have to feel just because strategic planning have accepted a particular site that we cannot object. We just can't object, perhaps, or it's harder to object to the principle of development, but we can certainly take issue with the details. And I think Councillor Barlow's already suggested maybe we could be looking for more in terms of habitat sort of mitigation measures, bee and bat boxes and so on. So, Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. Well, the overlooking was the reason I was concerned about the levels, because if you're on a lower level, but I think, is there something that we can do to mitigate overlooking? And normally it's like a bathroom with a frosted window or something like that, but if you've got the main front windows heading in that direction, I'm not sure it would be reasonable to have frosted windows across your master bedroom or something like that, but I don't know if there's any way we can address that.
Well, I think we'd have to have good grounds that there was actually overlooking. My answer to overlooking is always plant a tree, quite honestly, because I've got that issue where I live. I wasn't overlooked, and then I was, due to development in the house behind. But fortunately, I'd planted some trees. And some then planted themselves as well, just to help matters. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the landscaping, it looks like there is planting on the boundary line to probably obscure overlooking. There are actually in there's a hedgehog home as well. So they have done some extra things. And also, I think in fences, they're putting in hedgehog runs and reinforcing the hedgerows which are already there with extra planting, along with solar panels. So I think they've done quite a bit on that front. But your bird boxes, if they're not mentioned, they ought to be there. And be bricks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So you're saying there's quite a lot specified already? Yeah, good, good. Okay, any other comments? Councillor Barlow, did you suggest?
Happy to approve subject, as per officer recommendation.
Okay, shall we look for a seconder for that? Oh, Councillor, yeah, you did, Steve, that's right. Any other speakers then before we go to a vote? Okay, in that case, we're ready to go to a vote. I think if Anne is correct, Ian, we don't really need to add any further conditions.
I haven't checked up about the bird boxes and the bee bricks. Yes.
Okay.
Should be deregulate every house.
Yeah, fine. Yeah. Okay. So we have that proposal. So all those in favour? Looks unanimous. Turn myself off. Any against? No. And no abstentions? No. Okay. In that case, that one is approved. And we now move to agenda item 11, planning application 232749 MFUL. This is the NHS Vaccination Centre at Greendale Business Park, which we visited yesterday. As soon as we have the planning officer switch over complete, we'll go over to Paul Golding to present the report. As soon as we get past that one. Here we go.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. So this application is before members today. It's for the permanent retention of the building and site and its use as a COVID surge centre only. It was originally reported to committee in March this year, and it was originally recommended for refusal for the 4 reasons set out within the officer report. Members resolved to defer the application in favour of a site inspection to assess the landscape impact, which took place yesterday, and to allow the applicant time to provide a surface water drainage scheme for the site to address one of the officer's suggested reasons for refusal. The addendum report before you advises that the surface water drainage scheme that's been submitted and considered by the lead local flood authority is acceptable, such that officers no longer suggest this as a reason for refusal. The background and planning history for the building and the site is set out within the committee report, but it's important to highlight that the NHS building subject to this application was originally constructed under permitted development rights, which were established in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. A temporary planning permission was then granted by the council in 2022 for the continued use of the building by the NHS until 31st of December 2022, given the need for the facility to deal with the pandemic and to administer the vaccinations at the time. As part of that permission, a condition was imposed which required the use of the building to cease in December 2022, and for the building and all the resulting materials to be removed from the land and the land restored to its former condition by the 31st of December 2023. The condition was imposed because the use of the building and its siting were considered to be acceptable only in exceptional circumstances to aid in dealing with the global pandemic to fight COVID-19, and on the basis that the use of the site and the building were contrary to Strategy 7, Policy D1 of the local plan, being outside of the defined developable area of Greendale Business Park as defined by the Villages Plan, DPD, and because the building has a detrimental impact on the character and appearance of the surroundings. A planning application for the retention and permanent use of the building as an NHS vaccination centre and for various commercial uses was refused by Planning Committee in December 2023 because of the lack of local plan policy support and the conflict of spatial approach contained within the local plan, the unsustainable location of the site, the visual impact and the harm to the landscape, and in the absence of a surface water management scheme. So just to remind members, the application site is edged in red to the north of Greendale Business Park, and it is located outside of the extent of authorised uses as defined by the Villages Plan, and therefore located within open countryside. No landscape designations apply to the site. And just for a bit of context, you can see that the A3052 to the north of the site runs, and Whitecross Road runs down to the east. The land itself rises to the north of the building and drops to the south and the east. And there's trees and hedging to the north, east and west of the building, which are the subject of the tree preservation order. So the proposal seeks planning permission for the permanent retention of the existing building and hard surfacing of the site, and to use the building solely as a COVID surge centre by the NHS. It's accessed by the A3052 to the north via two entrance points, here and here on the plan, off the internal Business Park Road. The proposal includes extensive areas of concrete hard surfacing to the east and gravel parking areas for staff parking to the west. And just as a point of clarification, members should note that the site plan doesn't correctly show the surface material in the northern part of the site here, which has actually been covered in tarmac and not gravel as specified on this plan. So, as mentioned earlier, this slide here shows the applicant's proposed surface water drainage strategy. So basically the intention is for the surface water runoff generated from the building and parking areas to be intercepted by a new swale and filter drain on the eastern side of the site, marked here on the plan. And that would be directed to a new cellular attenuation tank, which would be constructed beneath the tarmac yard area, which is highlighted in blue here. This cellular tank would then discharge flows at greenfield rates to an existing as-built stormwater outfall, which discharges into the Grindle Brook. The County Council's flood risk management team have considered the drainage strategy and advised that they're supportive of the drainage strategy that's been put forward. Therefore, officers are satisfied that a compliance condition could be worded to the effect that the surface water drainage is installed, operated and maintained in accordance with these details, and therefore the previous recommended reason for refusal in this respect has been overcome. So just got a few photos from within the site, just to give a bit of context, but this is a view of the site from the south, from the internal access road through the business parks, which shows the elevated position of the site at the highest part of the business park. And this is a view from the other access to the eastern part of the site, which is laid to gravel and is currently used for outside storage and the parking of vehicles. And the building itself is steel framed with dark green clad walls under a dark grey coloured metal profile roof. It measures 10.5 metres in height to the ridge, 72 metres in length and 26.6 metres in width, with an internal floor area of 1,872 square metres. And these are the photos of the building taken from within the site, showing its eastern and southern elevations, as well as the extent of the concrete and tarmac hard surfacing across the site. So these are the floor plans, which show that the proposals for a single use of the building by the NHS as part of their COVID surge protection programme. The NHS aren't the applicants for this application, but are understood to have a long-term lease on the building, such that should the vaccination centre ever be required for another medical emergency, they could relocate back into the building and operate it as a surge centre. This slide here illustrates the council's strategic approach to development of Greendale Business Park, which is contained within the East Devon Villages Plan, and which defines the extent of authorised uses for the Greendale Business Park by the purple line on the map above. And this application, as you can see, is located outside of these authorised uses. So the application site is therefore in the countryside, where under the provisions of Strategy 7 of the local plan, development is only permitted where it's in accordance with a specific local or neighbourhood plan policy that explicitly permits such development, and where it would not cause landscape, amenity or environmental harm. There is policy in the local plan, policy E7, which is extensions to employment sites, which is a development management policy that establishes one of the exceptions to the policy of general constraint on development in the countryside. And this policy does provide for extensions to existing employment sites within the district, but specifically excludes Greendale Business Park. So there's no policy support within the current local plan for this proposal. So this slide, so the landscape and visual harm from the development identified by the council's landscape officer has been detailed within the committee report. And the landscape officer concludes that the development results in unacceptable landscape and visual harm due to the alterations to the landform, the size and scale of the building and its elevated position above the business park. And this plan here shows several localised viewpoints from which the outward expansion of the business park and the building is visible from public vantage points outside of the site. And most members have obviously now had the opportunity to view the proposal from a number of these viewpoints. So this is one of the viewpoint 1, which is from the Woodbury Road, 900 metres to the south of the site, where you can basically look up and see the building in its elevated position above the business park. This is viewpoint 2 from Whitecross Road to the southern edge of the business park, which again shows the elevated position of the site above it. There's viewpoint 4 from Whitecross Road to the northeast, which shows the building visible behind the trees. At the time the photo was taken, it's obviously noted from the visit yesterday that the trees are now more in leaf. So actually from this viewpoint, you can't see the building as much as this photo indicates until obviously leaf cover has reduced. And obviously members note that this includes the new unauthorised access road, which does actually fall outside of this planning application, because you see that here. And this is viewpoint 6, which is taken from Sanctuary Lane and the Collerton Raleigh footpath, which is about one kilometre from to the southeast of the site. So basically, to conclude, all key material plan considerations, issues and policies are set out within the committee report, along with the 3 reasons for refusal. Officers consider that the starting point for determining this application is that it's for a retention of a site and building in the countryside that was originally constructed under permitted development rights. The building had a temporary permission and was only approved by the council due to exceptional circumstances at the time created by the pandemic. The fact that the building and the site are already in use is not considered to be relevant to the determination of this application, because when it was originally constructed under permitted development, the council couldn't give any consideration to the location of the building, its siting, and how it could be considered against local plan policies, which include the principle of development, the accessibility and sustainability of the site, its landscape and visual impact, and any other relevant material considerations. In respect to the first reason for refusal and the principle of development, the site is in the countryside where development is strictly controlled. And development on the site has led to the outward expansion of the business park into the countryside and outside of the extent of authorised uses of Greendale Business Park, which is not supported either by the local plan or the Adopted Villages Plan. So the proposal conflicts with the strategic approach towards Greendale Business Park within the local plan, which is effectively to limit its outward expansion in the interest of sustainability and minimising landscape harm. So the proposal is considered to be contrary to Strategy 7 and E7 of the local plan, which seeks to manage development in the countryside and at the business park specifically. In respect to the second reason for refusal, the site's location in the countryside is remote from settlements and has limited access by public transport. Spatially and geographically, Greendale Business Park isn't located close to a settlement or other services and facilities, and other than being on the bus route, is not particularly accessible by sustainable modes of transport. And it also creates few opportunities for linked trips. And whilst this application no longer proposes commercial uses for the building, officers don't consider that sufficient justification has been provided by the applicant or the NHS to demonstrate why a reserved vaccination centre site is required, why it needs to be provided in this location in favour of a more sustainable locations within the district's towns and villages, which is more in line with the council's overall spatial approach to development. Much of the justification that has been provided is centred around the fact that the site has been used historically and is well known and a tried and tested destination for responding to the pandemic. However, officers are of the view that this does not justify the location of this reserved vaccination centre site, which may never be needed, and it hasn't been demonstrated that such a service cannot be provided in equally well-known locations that are more sustainable within the district, a view that has been supported by the planning inspectorate in dismissing the appeal for the vaccination centre at the Greendale Farm Shop site. So in land use terms, the proposal is not considered to represent a sustainable form of development from an environmental perspective, which weighs further against the proposal within the overall planning balance. And in respect to the third reason for refusal, in the absence of a robust justification for retention of the building, the development outside of Greendale Business Park has resulted in landscape harm, as identified by the landscape officer, due to alterations to landform, the size and scale of the building and its elevated position above the business park. These adverse impacts, landscape impacts arising, and the visual impact of the building is a further environmental concern which weighs against the proposal within the overall planning balance. So having regard for all of the above, officers are of the view that no overriding material considerations have been presented which justify a departure from the local plan. This proposal continues to represent an unjustified and unsustainable form of development that has led to the outward expansion of Greendale Business Park beyond its extent of authorised uses, which is intrusive and encroaches into the open countryside. This harm, coupled with a conflict with the local plan's strategic and plan-led approach towards the outward expansion of the business park contained within the East Devon Villages Plan and its wider sustainability objectives, is considered to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the social and economic benefits that would be derived from the building's permanent retention and its use by the NHS as a surge centre, the need for which has not been robustly justified. The application is therefore recommended for refusal for the 3 reasons set out in the officer report. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before we go to public speakers, I just need to confirm with Mr. Hunter that those who didn't take part in the site visit will not be eligible to speak or vote on this application. Is that correct?
Code of conduct says that they shouldn't.
I seem to remember some correspondence about that. So Councillor Bloxham and Councillor Chapman, no, Muddy was there yesterday. Oh, Sarah's left. So it's just Councillor Bloxham who wasn't there yesterday. So you don't need to remain if you don't wish to, Kim. Okay. You missed a treat, I must say, but okay. So we'll hear from Woodbury Parish Council, Cheryl McGawley, sorry. And you have 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for listening. Can I just ask a question? And it's not a parish council, well, it's sort of, or a Cheryl question. Well, whilst you said what you said, you keep on going on about open countryside. And a lot of our meetings, we're told that there is no open countryside and you can build in open countryside. So I'm really confused to what is or not or am I not allowed to ask that question?
The term open countryside, even though it may not appear to be, actually refers to anything in planning terms that's outside a built-up area boundary or otherwise agreed boundary. So, yes, so we often get applications that we've just had one, in fact, that in planning terms is deemed to be in the open countryside and therefore subject to different planning restrictions or requirements.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So it's
plan.
different for houses to industrial?
No, open countryside is open countryside.
Oh, lovely. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. I represent Woodbury Parish Council, and we actually do support this application. The building, although currently outside the employment area for Greendale Business Park, and therefore the location is considered built in the open countryside, we have weighed this up, especially as this has been in situ for several years. We have not received any complaints. It is well hidden and not affecting any neighbours or causing any issues, i.e. flooding. It has been used as a vital NH facility and it is important. Such facilities should remain for future use. This facility provides local employment, is on a bus route and has good infrastructure in place. To remove this building would be highly unsuitable. Keeping it in situ will have a carbon saving. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And we'll hear from the agent, Paul Cairns.
Good afternoon, members. My name is Paul Cairns. I'm a planning barrister and make this short representation on behalf of the applicant. You can properly and lawfully determine that the unique material considerations in play here justify departure from the local plan and grant planning permission. The weight that you give those material considerations is entirely for you. Planning decisions are made in the real world. The existing building is lawfully permitted, and this is relevant to the determination of this application, irrespective of its existence being due to permitted development rights. To imagine that it is a greenfield site ignores the reality that you have seen on the site visit, along with the climate change impacts of its removal and probable re-erection in the event of another pandemic. Furthermore, those potential climate change impacts are significant, serious, and not challenged. The local plan conflicts need to be put into perspective. The refusal recommendation, as you've heard, is premised upon Greendale Park not being appropriate for expansion in policy terms due to accessibility and landscape impacts, along with a recent refusal of the Greendale Farm Shop Vaccination Centre. Firstly, in national policy terms, the plan is out of date. The new local plan process might indicate that the existing Greendale Park boundary may need to flex in the future, as was recently recognised by the Planning Inspectorate in respect of the similarly restricted Hill-Barton Business Park. Secondly, the landscape impact is for the subjective assessment of those of you who have visited the site. And although views of the building are largely localised and principally from within Greendale Park itself. Furthermore, as you've heard, you are not here concerned with a designated or protected landscape. Thirdly, the Greendale Farm Shop refusal was in respect of a building that was not a permitted development. Also, an integral part of the justification for its refusal was the existence of this site. Fourthly, nobody seriously disputes that the NHS needs this facility as part of its surge protection policy. You're considering a scheme that may ultimately save lives. This is obviously a very significant social benefit to the residents of East Devon. It's also a permissible perspective in which you can consider the accessibility concerns. Specifically, there is no development plan or legal requirement for the applicant or the NHS to demonstrate that alternative sites have been considered and rejected. You can and should consider this scheme on its own merits as presented to you now and with the significant support that it has generated. Finally, this is ultimately a balance for your judgment. Any development plan conflicts can properly and lawfully be displaced if you consider that to be justified by the very many benefits of the scheme. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I'm standing up because I've got cramp in my leg. No, that was all it was. Right, I haven't done enough cycling today, that's my problem. Okay, we'll hear from the ward members, Councillor Young and Councillor Ingham. It's always you first, Jeff. Shall we take Ben first this time? I thought, oh, it must be alphabetical, but I comes before J, so that's not that.
Yeah.
Ben.
Yeah, and B comes before G as well, so yeah, I lose twice, don't I? And I'm tremendously younger than Jeff, of course. So we'll stop there, shall we? Yeah. So thank you, Chair. You heard about the boundary of Greendale Business Park. I know that well because it was retired Councillor Ray Bloxham and myself that lobbied for that to be created, because we felt in the previous 20, 30 years, or 20, 25 years, the development of Greendale Business Park had been almost encouraged by East Devon District Council. They didn't seem to take much interest on what was going on there. So it's ironic now that a different attitude is prevalent. So I say that because if anyone you would expect to take exception to this site, as one of the instigators of that boundary, I would say I should, but I don't. If EDDC take exception to this site, perhaps we should have done so for the previous now 25, 30 years. But seemingly it's right now that we take exception to the site. Okay, so we have to consider it in isolation on its own merits, which is fair enough. That boundary was created or formalised over 10 years ago in principle, and then adopted in what's now the current local plan and soon to be replaced. But I would say to you, there's events that have happened between then and now that are worthy of your consideration. How many of you thought there was going to be a pandemic? Silence, okay? And maybe some of you have forgotten how desperately we needed to get that first jab. I know I couldn't get mine soon enough. I felt threatened and fearful. So there is, I believe, a justified credibility on the continuance of usage for that. And you'll remember that when you considered this back along, those of you who were on the council, most of you were, that we did look at many reasons for its continuance. I think it's appropriate that we consider, for example, now also the emerging second town in East Devon. The proximity will be interesting because, just to remind you, those of you who haven't been involved, the identification of that second town was built upon the proximity of 5 economic centres, justifying its reason. So I would say there is sustainable options for the future for this building, purely as a contingency for the NHS. And I think that's very important. Without labouring and going through all of those reasons that we've considered before, just think of what are we trying to do here? Are we going to take what I would say a pedantic decision and make sure you stick to the black and white of the needs, the planning needs? Yes, they have to be considered, but are they outweighed by the needs of our communities, or our community as East Devon as a whole? I suggest to you that it would be bloody-minded to refuse this application, and it's in the interests of our communities to, in fact, approve it. So I hope that's what you will do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll go over to Councillor Jeff Young now.
Thank you, Chair. I would first like to comment on some of the Parish Council comments taken from the report and what Cheryl said today. They say the building is currently outside the employment area for Greendale Business Park, and therefore the location is considered to be in the open countryside. That's right. I can confirm that within our current local plan and our emerging local plan, this site is outside the employment zone for the business park and will remain within the open countryside. The Parish Council say that they have not received any complaints. It is well hidden and not causing any issue. Not so. I can confirm I have had many complaints as ward councillor, including neighbours from the site, and I can confirm it can be seen from many locations as described in the photographs that you saw earlier. I originally explained to residents when they were complaining about this site that this building was built under government emergency powers during the COVID emergency as a temporary building, and it should be returned to agricultural following the demise of the COVID requirements. Yes, I agree there are some COVID requirements, and I've got a sore arm because I've just had a jab, but not agreed now. They say the vaccination centre has not caused flooding, but I can report that the Grindle Brook, directly down from this escarpment, has flooded on a number of occasions, and on one occasion damaged a house last year. However, I cannot confirm this event can be linked to the lack of proper drainage at this site. That's the problem with retrospective developments that never have consultee expert advice generally, resulting in missed important infrastructure measures. The Parish Council claim it's a vital NHS facility, but the local doctors I speak to would prefer their patients to use their surgeries for these important jabs, therefore providing an extra funding stream to them rather than filtered off down to the main NHS. Also, please note that this facility is reliant on volunteer labour, which was beneficial during the emergency, but can it be justified now? Therefore, is it actually providing local employment as claimed? I turn to the proposals for the installation of drainage measures, which will require a lot of the the tarmac to be broken up and the tanks and pipes placed under the relayed apron. Re-engineering to actually correct the missing drainage to make this temporary structure be acceptable for a need that I am told is not required should not be allowed. As we are the partners of our wonderful NHS, but some would argue a bit mismanaged NHS, I would hate to think I was party to this money pit. So please reject this application and agree to the officer's recommendation to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. So, do we have any questions, firstly? Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair.
Am I mistaken, or was the original emergency centre West Point?
There was one at West Point, I think.
As I understand it, they started out at West Point and they moved out of West Point to this site afterwards. So, I mean, so long as West Point is standing there, if we have another emergency like we had and we all get locked down and that, then we'll have an empty barn of West Point sitting there.
Yeah, well, that's one for the NHS. Yeah,
Yes, West Point was used for COVID patients only. Because a number
it's
of
used
my...
as a Nightingale hospital, you're saying? Yeah, yeah. There was one, I think, in Southern Industrial Estate as well on the site of the, yeah. So, yeah, there were various ones dotted around, but yeah. We're still on questions, so Councillor Anne Hall.
Thank you, Chair. If we refuse this and it is put back to agricultural use, does that mean all that concrete and tarmac has to be taken up, and the environmental impact or harm of that would be absolutely massive? But I had an understanding that it had some concrete underneath some topsoil, which was then taken away. But how much of the site was that? And when it was down to that, what agriculture use was it? No. Was it just lying there as a green field not being used? Because this is a space, like you said prior, we've got to use the space in the best way we can. That was to do with housing, this is commercial. But I want to say, what is it? Is it actually just a piece of grass, which someone has to go and mow? Or is it put to good use as an agricultural piece of land? Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Matt Hall.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 4 questions. If the case officer could put up the purple lined plan of Greendale, please. So, forgive my naivety, but we're talking about this section to the northeast of the purple pinky line, outside of the boundary of Greendale. Below that site is, we call it a square, and below that site is another bit of what looks like commercialised development, which is outside of the boundary. On the far left hand of the side, we've also got another section of what appears to me to be part of Greendale, but is outside of the pinky purple line. So, do those 2 sites have permission? If they have permission, I presume we granted that. What is the difference between us granting those 2 sites compared to the northern site? The second question I have, not relating to the map, is, so I'm hearing that there is no assessed need for this, but yet if we went out with the enforcement and basically forced this building down tomorrow, and we went to the vaccination centre at the farm shop tomorrow and closed that down, something that is already up and running, opening and taking appointments, where do those people go? Is there an answer to that? If there's no answer to that in the short term, is there a possibility of granting this permission on a temporary basis? Third question, and I'm struggling with this, is we got an unauthorised access road which is associated with this building, but then doesn't form part of this application. And I don't understand why it's not part of the application, because normally when enforcement go into things, they usually tell you either to take things down as per the requirements or put in a planning permission. So quite what is the status with regards to this? And I think finally, quite an important question for me is, there's a bit of me that understands this NHS link and the link with obviously needing Class E use. But is there anything that this council can do through conditioning that would stop the day after this permission being granted, the building being changed to any other use within Class E? Thank you.
Okay, and I think, did I have another question anywhere? Councillor Jenny Brown.
Hello, right, I went to the site visit yesterday and I really have issues with this amazing landscape impact that it's supposed to have. One of the sites, yes, okay,
Have you got
see
a
it a lot.
question,
No,
Jenny?
I just say they can't say landscape impact when it's not. No, it's not. As they're saying, they were clutching at straws on that, I think.
We're on to debate there, Jenny, so, but we'll take answers to the questions first. So if there's no more questions, then we'll just take some answers.
One other one, just to confirm, Councillor Young said that it's not in the local plan, but of course that hasn't been finalised yet. My understanding is that we are revisiting or will be revisiting other sites that were passed over, so we don't know if this is in the plan or not. We know the ones that are put in the plan, but we don't know the ones that were passed over, is my understanding of the local plan where we stand at the present time.
I think because the sort of age of the local plan has been cited, Councillor Young was saying there's no proposal to expand, so it's not as though it's even going to, or should even be coming up.
Well, there is, sorry, in the local plan, it is down for 20 acres. It was put in for 20 acres, my understanding was, of expansion for Greendale. But at the end of the day, it was passed over. No decision was taken, as with all sites.
Yeah.
But they are revisiting it because we are still looking for sites.
For employment land.
Yeah.
Okay, right, thank you. Yeah.
So my understanding in terms of the strategic planning is you're quite right that this site was part of a larger land proposal that were put forward by the landowners as an allocation. And yes, you're also right that it was passed over. But my understanding is that unlike our housing, we have got enough, the land that was agreed to be taken forward more than meets our industrial land requirements for the local plan period. So I'm not sure that there is an expectation of necessarily revisiting this particular site, in the way that not all of the residential sites that are passed over will be revisited. Only certain ones will be taken back for looking, because obviously some of them were passed over, but I think were recommended for refusal by officers, and that was confirmed by members. So I suppose it's just making the point, because it's likely that perhaps some analogy will be made to the sites we were looking at this morning, which are outside the development boundary, contrary to the current local plan, departures to the local plan. All of those sites are sites which have been agreed and confirmed as sites that will be carried forward. This industrial land has not been agreed as a site that will be carried forward to the local plan. So there is a distinct difference in that respect.
Okay, quite a few other questions there, so we can deal with those. Yep.
Yeah, I can. Well, in terms of the question about the extent of the hard surfacing of the site, it's difficult to answer that question because obviously I've only been to the site since this has been constructed. But there was, and as is detailed in the committee report, there was an enforcement appeal in 2017 against a breach of planning control, which was for like a number of outside storage compounds, levelling of land, laying of hard surfacing, concrete, security fencing, etc., and 2 buildings. And part of the requirements of the notice that was upheld by the inspector was to permanently remove from the land all of these particular elements, and also to replace the topsoil in a number of the compounds and dispose of all the materials, but I couldn't tell you the extent of hard surfacing that was underneath before this development started.
Can I come back on that? So how are we going to enforce what is taken away when we don't know what we started off with? Because if we've got a lot of concrete underneath there, which we're going to allow, we really need the drainage scheme in there, don't we? Because if it hits solid concrete and it's on a downward slope, you're going to have more flooding because it's going to run on the concrete and down. So we either say it's all got to come up, then it's all permeable, or we've got to have a drainage system in there, surely, to help prevent flooding.
So in terms of enforcement, being asked on the spot what was there before and what was there, we can't give you that clear answer because we haven't investigated that. We will have the information because we would be able to look through the appeal documents, which will have had accompanying plans that would have obviously clearly set out, that an inspector would have looked at what was actually existing on the site. So it's not that we are not going to be able to understand what the previous condition of the land was. It's that, unfortunately, we can't give you that definitive answer today because we don't have that available at this minute.
So we can be assured that there wouldn't be very much concrete left to cause flooding with it just going across the bottom like a rock and then down through the rest of the site and into other places.
My understanding is that there was some concrete hard standing that was not removed and that it was effectively topsoiled over. Now, I'm not saying this is what my understanding of the fact, which in effect would have had an impact on runoff, because if you've got a layer of soil and earth and grass, that's quite different in terms of how water moves than when it's just going straight onto to concrete. But it's quite clear that this current scheme has extended the amount of hard surfacing significantly. And we saw yesterday on site that areas of, that were previously shown as gravelled, etc., are now tarmacked. So there has definitely been an increase in hard surfacing on the site. Sorry, So one of the questions is what happens if we don't allow this scheme, because the currently operating vaccination centre doesn't have planning permission, has been dismissed at appeal, and shortly, sorry, I'm just getting a little message here from our enforcement officer with a little bit of information about the other point, which whilst it's still flashing on my screen, it's saying that the concrete that was there has always been there. It was covered in around 1 metre of soil, which was grassed. This was agreed by previous development manager, and on the basis that if there were any flooding issues, it would have to revert. So there was about 1 metre of soil grassed over the concrete that it was decided effectively to under-enforce and not require the wholesale digging up of that part of the site. So that's on that aspect. So at the time that the inspector considered the farm shop vaccination centre, they considered I suppose the need for the centre and the location. Was this the appropriate location? And at the time, it was not proposed to the inspector, and it was not part of their balance, that the existing big building would be used in the event that this one was dismissed, because at the time that was also didn't have planning permission. So that decision to refuse that permission was not on the premise of there being an alternative site available. And this scheme, as proposed, is not and was not at the time ever to be as a currently day-to-day used vaccination centre. The premise of this application is that it is just for emergencies, that the building will not be used, it will be locked up, mothballed effectively, and only brought into use in such a situation as we have another pandemic. So this building is not required for the ongoing distribution of vaccines. That matter was considered as part of the appeal that was dismissed, and where it was deemed that it is not, this area generally is not a sustainable location for that type of use, and there was no robust justification for the need for a vaccination centre in the area of Greendale. The other question is, why is the unauthorised access road not included in the plan? This application has not come as a consequence of enforcement investigations. This application has come forward because the application, obviously, the building had reached the end of its temporary consent. The landowners sought a planning permission to change the use for employment and NHS use, which came to committee and was refused. And this is the follow-up application to only have this as a surge centre. I don't know why the unauthorised access road is not part of the application. We did ask the applicants yesterday that question, and we didn't get a reply. So I'm afraid I can't tell you why it is not, but obviously it does mean that should planning permission be granted today, that access road will remain unauthorised. And then we would have to take a view as to whether we're going to take, whether it's expedient to take any enforcement action against it or not. The matter of the Class E use, so yes, this use is quite specifically for Class E medical and health facility, and if members were minded to approve this, then officers would be recommending that a planning condition is applied, saying that the building shall only be used for those purposes. And I think, again, if members were minded to approve, you'd have to bear in mind whether or not that is just as an emergency NHS surge centre, that very specific use, or whether you think any medical or health facility which could be operating 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, is appropriate on the site, because at the moment it doesn't specify in the description of development that it is only for the NHS. I think
It's outside the boundary.
the use is outside the boundary. Just one moment.
While they're deciding what's what?
I think we're in a position to say that I'm afraid that we can't tell you just off the top of our heads what those buildings are, whether they're authorised, whether they're unauthorised. So I'm afraid I can't shed any further light on that.
Okay. Councillor Barlow, you have, Bailey.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I understand the question that Councillor Hall asked, but we're not here to determine what's authorised and what's not authorised on Greendale. We're here to determine whether the building stays as it is or it doesn't. So I can't see why we're going down this alternative route, which is absolutely not relevant at all.
Well, it is relevant, because if the red line...
No, it's not. We're here to discuss one building, we're not here to discuss anything else.
Yeah, but the one building, Councillor Bailey, one of the arguments is that it's outside of the boundary. And I'm asking the question, there are other things which appear to be outside of the boundary. So how precious is this council over the boundary? That's why I'm asking.
Okay, so I think we'll just draw a line under that one. There is a boundary, whether or not there's other unauthorised or authorised development without it. I know on one occasion we certainly approved a building that had been built slightly not to specification and edged over the boundary. We decided in that particular instance that because it was a relatively small infringement, we weren't going to push that one. So, any other questions? Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. My concern is that the viewing points that we were shown yesterday, in my opinion, had little or no consequence because you couldn't see anything.
Is this a question?
Well, it's a point.
Because I think the
question is,
Councillor Brown.
if you allow me to finish, the question is, why were we subjected to these alleged viewing points when they weren't viewing points at all? One was in the back garden of a pub, one was in a road, and one was driving down the road where you look through the gate for 2 seconds, you could just catch it at the corner of your eye. So I can't see what that was relevant to at all. I think it was there to fog the situation, if I may be so bold, Chairman.
Well, I think they were there to enable us to assess the landscape impact, and it sounds as though you have done so.
In the back garden of the pub said to me, "Where is it? I can't see it."
No.
Do you remember?
Yes, I do.
Well, there. That's my case, Chairman.
Maybe I shouldn't have had 6 pints of scrumpy before I got out into the garden. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions. This building and the COVID vaccination centre behind the shop, which the landowner gave courtesy of their well-being for the residents of East Devon, the use of his land. So that is the first point. And
is this building up to a question?
Is it costing, did it cost East Devon District Council anything? And the second point is boundaries. Now, boundaries, as far as I can make out, having been on this council for a good few years, are always changing. Brixington School, my ward, Brixington, is no longer in Brixington. It is now in Halston. But you can't get to Brixington School.
Is this building up to a question, Maggie?
Yes. Why are you placing so much emphasis on the boundary when the council can actually move it? Because Lympstone and Brixington, the boundary goes right through Goodmore's development. Yet 10 years ago, it was all Brixington. But the boundaries have been changed. So now all of a sudden, we're watching the boundaries.
I don't think we're comparing one thing and another, and I think you're making a statement about boundaries.
Yeah, why are we sticking to the boundaries? That's why I'm saying, because boundaries change all the time.
Some boundaries change.
Yeah, well, this is why I'm asking, Chairman, this is why I'm asking the officers, because they keep saying boundaries. And yet, as far as I can see, since I've been on the council, the boundaries around my ward have changed twice. I'm not even in the ward that I bought the house in. You know, where'd you go?
Members, can I just interject at this stage, please? You've all got an opportunity to speak when in debate, so if we've got some questions, can we have them, get them out of the way and then move on to debate, please? Thank you.
I have a question, Chair. The rates on the building, whether it's occupied or not, I presume rates will be due on that building to East Devon District Council, regardless of whether it's empty, full, used or not.
I don't see the relevance of that in terms of planning. This is...
Well, there's an economic benefit, and we've been told there's no economic... I don't want to get into debate, Chair, with you.
The economic benefit would only be to the council, not to the general area. So economic benefit, when we're assessing it, is in terms of employment, in terms of benefit to the local area, in terms of that being used for employment,
And that
not
is your
our
state.
own benefit.
Well, surely the own benefit of the council is the benefit of the area and the people, but I'm not going to debate this with you at the present time. I'll wait for my time because Mr. Hunter might tell me off otherwise.
Yeah. Okay.
Just on the matter of boundaries, yes, the council does have the opportunity to revisit but built-up area boundaries and the boundaries to Greendale Business Park. That's the process that's happening at the moment in the local plan review. And it was proposed to change the boundary of Greendale Business Park by the landowners and to make it bigger. And Strategic Planning Committee's view at present is not to do that, to keep the boundaries as they are. So that's the current situation with regards to the boundaries.
Okay. So I think you've heard it there. So Councillor Gazzard, is this a question or I think, okay.
Thank you, Chair. Have we got any information from the NHS that there is a proven need for this unit as it stands at the moment? I mean, we're nowhere near a pandemic at the moment. And unless there's any information from the NHS to say that we're probably going into a pandemic, have they got any reason why they would want to keep this unit going? When we all know that doctors' surgeries, etc., are offering appointments hand over fist at the moment.
I can't get one of mine.
It's certainly not in use at the moment. Well, if the NHS do think there's another pandemic coming, there's not information they're likely to share with the rest of us because we don't want to run out of toilet rolls again, you know. Or bread.
Yeah, I mean, as detailed in the report, officers' view is that there hasn't been a reasonable planning justification or evidence of need for continued use of the building. Obviously, at this moment in time, there isn't a state of emergency, and there's no timescale or certainty that the building is ever going to be required to vaccinate large numbers of people in the future. And that's why we've reached a view that we don't consider the appropriate justification has been provided to grant a permanent building on this site for that use.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not going to come back outside the committee. Okay, committee, if we've no further questions, we'll go into debate. And I'm going to kick off, actually. Much has been made of the carbon emissions of demolition of this building. Well, I would say that should have been considered when it was put up in the first place. Let's remember it was built under emergency legislation. And I think the NHS might have considered at that point that it was a temporary building and should have considered the costs of decommissioning, both in terms of economics and carbon. So I think that should have been considered in the first place. Pandemics, generally 100-year events. The last pandemic before the present one, I know because my grandfather died in it, was just after the First World War. So I'm not going to say there couldn't be another one in the next 5 years, but it could be 5, it could be 25, it could be 50, it could be 100, it could be more than 100. So I think the officer's view is that there is absolutely no justification for this building. Is it seriously going to be mothballed until there's another pandemic? Or are we going to see further applications coming back saying, well, actually, it's not being used, it's there now, why don't we just make use of it? On the question of boundaries, Greendale boundary was set because it wasn't considered a sustainable location and it was felt that further expansion of Greendale was not a good idea. And ever since then, there have been constant attempts to push beyond that boundary. So I think my feeling is that officers have a very strong case here. We can defend it should it come to appeal, and I'm going to support refusal. Okay, committee, over to you. Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. What happened there? Going back to comments by Councillor Ingham about he was part of the original setting up the boundary, I seem to recall conversations along those lines when I was being encouraged to be a councillor in 2015, and we got in that, was in that same group, and so we're here now, and now we're saying we're not wanted anymore or something. I don't know, but you know, but they seem to have changed their views as to certain people. But I think, you know, we're fighting to keep these open countryside, and I think it's important we do protect our open countryside. And when it's identified that this site is excessive, the overall Greendale site for the location, I think we should be protecting that open countryside around there. It is visible. I could see it. I could see it through the trees, even if other people were struggling to work out where the building was. And some of us, a lot of the comment at the time yesterday was about, well, we can't see it from the car. Well, not everyone spends all the time in the car, and some of us do a lot of walking and cycling, and we do observe a lot more on foot and by bicycle than you will do in a car, because you have to be more conscious of the road. And you do see these things, and they really do stick out, and that is a long way up above the rest of the main part of Greendale site. And there was comment about concern of expanding this along the rest of the hill, which is quite likely, because that's basically how Greendale was happening anyway. It was just going and going and going, and we're just leaving this open. If we allow this to stay, we're just leaving the whole site open for further creep all around the area, and I think we need to stand our ground. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. There's a number of things. First of all, I was surprised that Woodbury Parish Council have put in no objections, and Councillor Ben Ingham has supported Woodbury Parish Council, and then the councillor behind me hasn't supported them, and he's put forward that these people have complained and these people have complained, but there's no evidence that they've complained. Not that I'm calling him a liar, because that would be not the thing to do, but there's no evidence that would stand up. So that's a surprise to me, and I think it's relevant that if we can support from one councillor and one local authority, albeit parish council is still a small local authority. So I'm surprised that one of their ward members is not supporting them, because I was under the impression that that's what ward members do. The other thing is that there is, at the opposite side of the valley, which I pointed out to some people yesterday, yourself included if I remember, that there's a very large, or two very large buildings going up on the other side of the valley, which have got planning permission, and they're to do with the anaerobic digester, which is producing electricity for Greendale is self-sufficient. I was told, quite rightly, by Mrs. Ormsey, that this was done under different planning regulations as agricultural buildings. But when a stranger or myself, anybody in the room, sees that building, which stands out like a sore thumb, that is all right in the eyes of the authority here. But you're still looking at a horrible building. Now, whether it's got the right or wrong planning permission is not relevant. Now, this one was put up with consent, and we're debating whether it carries on. Now, this one is hidden away, you can hardly see it, as the chairman mentioned just now. So I can't see what all the fuss is about. It's in the eye of the beholder. And if Peter's going on his bicycle and he's looking through there at the building, he should be looking where he's going. There's lots of potholes in that road. So be careful. And I really think that the fact that the local authority, us, are taking the rates from this building, which you deem to be illegal, is a bit of hypocrisy, dare I say. Because you deem it to be illegal, but it's not that illegal because you'll take money for it being there. And that seems to me to be not right, morally speaking. Thank you, Chair.
I think it's not illegal. It's just been built without planning permit. Oh, it does have. It was originally built with a temporary planning permission, the relevance of the other buildings. One is they are on the Greendale site, and there is an agricultural justification for their being there, in that they're covering up the silage. And much has been made of the self-sufficiency of Greendale in terms of producing their own electricity. Unless they have an internal wiring system, I think what they probably mean is they produce an amount of electricity that goes into the grid equivalent to what they are using. And it is very questionable whether an anaerobic digester, particularly if the material that fuels it is being brought in by lorry from elsewhere, whether that is actually renewable electricity. So I think, yeah. Well, it is. Okay. I totally agree in terms of landscape impact. The other one has much greater, but there are reasons why we could not have refused that one. This one we can. But I agree, the landscape impact is not the most significant factor here, but that is not the most, well, in my mind, is not the most pressing reason for its refusal. Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested to hear you say that the landscape is not the most important feature here. I wonder what the important feature of not allowing this building is then, if it's not spoiling the landscape. It can't be the carbon. The carbon has already been put there. We've already laid the concrete. This has permission. This isn't a speculative thing. This isn't someone coming to us saying we want to rip up some green fields. This has planning permission to be there. Temporary, admittedly, but this has planning permission to be there. Now, you say that the NHS should have allocated the amount that it was going to cost to remove that when they said they needed it. But at the time, and it's all very well saying, oh, it's all right, we could have our doctors inject it because the doctors would like to earn the money. At the time that this was put up, doctors wouldn't want to go anywhere. They didn't have the time to do anything like that because we were in a pandemic. It was an emergency. And thank God there were people like us that could do it. I remember when I saw this happening, that went up in 28 days, and I know there was a concrete pad there, which I'm sure helped. But even to put that up, it made me actually feel proud that we still in Britain have the ability to compete with people like China and other places that were showing us what they could do at great speed. And here we were in little old East Devon, could do it as well. And I, for one, was very proud of the fact that it went up so quickly and very grateful that it went up so quickly. It's all very being blasé now, saying, oh, we know better, we could do this, we could do that. But if it happened again, and it was there, and it was available, it would be a very useful thing for our population, whether we like it or not. We don't know, you're quite right. It's a bit like the storms that we've had to deal with, once in 100-year storms. But as we're always told, that doesn't mean they happen once every 100 years. It means the average is it might happen tomorrow. There might be 2 in the next 10 years, and then not 1 for 200 years. You just don't know. This is the whole point of planning. Planning is meant to be to plan for the future, to protect and to prepare. It would be sad, and again, this isn't what we've got to look at today, but in my thoughts, it would be sad that this building is just sat there locked up. Especially when we are so woefully short, regardless of what we say of the future plan may be, at the present time, and we can't have it both ways. At the end of the day, we are we are moving away from our, I'm looking for the right wording here, sorry, I had it all here. We are moving away from our plan at the present time, departure from the plan, if we were to go and approve this. There's no doubt about that, because there is a red line at the present time around Greendale. But there exceptional circumstances for us to depart from the plan. We've departed from the plan 3 times today, and we're saying that the need for that is because we are short of housing. We are, at the present time, on our local plan, woefully short of employment land. Our employment officer says this, our economic development officer says this. It was quoted in an appeal decision on Hill Barton that we mentioned earlier, that we were woefully short of employment land. So it is a shame that we've got a building, and again, I am carbon literate, believe it or not. I went on 9 hours of training, and the important thing about carbon, they tell you, is not what you plan to save in the future, it's what you do now. This is the thing we've got to stop. Not we can save by putting up a solar panel, we can save 20 tonnes over the next 30 years, or we can put a tree in that will wipe 20 tonnes over the next 20 years. It's by putting in carbon now, that is the thing that we've got to avoid. Now, we've already done that. The carbon's already there. But if we say this building comes down, that has a huge cost, carbon cost, to take it down. And then it's got to be rebuilt if we want a replacement building of a similar size, because we are short of employment area. We are short of employment area. And you would have to not only dig up the concrete, but worse than that, we would have to produce new concrete to put down. And of course, we would have to dig up another green area. So here is a building that, and again, going back to the ones we've had today, we've had parish councils against it, we've had ward members against it, and we have approved it against our local plan. Here is something, admittedly against the local plan, but the parish council supports it, one of the ward members supports it, one doesn't. It just seems unbelievable that we are looking to knock something down that nobody seems to mind, that has caused no problem, that when we walked around yesterday, and no disrespect to our landscape, the reason we did this is because the last time we looked at this, their landscape, the applicant's landscape said it wasn't a problem, ours said it was terrible. So off we duly trotted, and I think we all agreed that it really wasn't that visible. And you had to, as Peter says, you could see it if you were on a bike or walking slowly past a gap in a field, a hedge, a fence, whatever. You could glimpse it if you looked for it, but certainly it wasn't visible. And if it was visible from any of the points, even the pictures, it was visible through other buildings. So to my way, it was in keeping with its area. It wasn't taking out. The landscape argument was saying, well, it is there. And that's a fair point, it is there. Councillor Hall said at the end of the day, was this was it an orchard that was going to grow the rarest apples or something like that you can't get anywhere else? No, it was a green field that's going to be cut. So, again, we're not going to feed thousands of people off the land there. But we might employ people. We're putting up more and more houses, and yet I can't remember the last time we had, I've sat on this for a year and a half now, any employment land passed. There may be some that have been delegated, or the rest of it. But certainly there isn't anything. We're supposed to supply 1 hectare of employment land for every 250 houses. Well, since I've been on here, I reckon we've done 2,000 houses in that time, and I can't remember any large amount of hectares of employment land. So, I'm not being funny, this is the 3rd time that we've been on this vaccination centre, where the first time it was 50-50, Chair's casting vote went against it. Second time, we actually voted not to knock it down, not to remove it, and we were going to again go, because we couldn't find a strategy to hang it on, because, as
Mr. Hunter always tells us, if you haven't got a strategy, we could have costs against us. Well, then I asked Building Control, found out that it's about £50,000 a year we get. I reckon we'd still be making a profit, even if we were taken to appeal on this and lost and got costs against us, because we've already had the rates of it, that we are lucky enough in East Devon at the present time to keep our business rates. So it's very important when we do keep those business rates, because we can do a lot of good with that. So to my way of thinking, I understand what you're saying, there is no economic benefit outside the council, but the council brings economic benefit and enables us to deliver things for the community. So my way of thinking, that should be taken into account, even if the officers don't like that. That's my opinion. So anyway, I've been looking at this. I have tried to remain undecided on this. But I must admit, having argued it twice before, it's very difficult to be able to do. However, I came in thinking that there might be something different, that you found the reason why we shouldn't have this. But I think personally that we can find reasons. The NPPF, section 86D, says that planning policies should be, and this is under building a strong competitive economy, planning policy should be flexible enough to accommodate needs not anticipated in the plan. Well, we didn't anticipate a pandemic, but we had one. So in 2018 and 19, there was no need for this building, but then there was a need. So it's there. Now it's there, really, should we actually say, no, just because it's outside a red line, it's doing no harm, it's not causing any flooding, and they're going to put in further mitigation, even though it's been there for 4 years, in the wettest year we've ever had on record, the beginning of this year, not cause any, certainly excessive flooding that has been there. Should we realistically, in this day and age where we've been asking for back boxes and I've been asking for back boxes and solar panels, should we be saying, no, because it's outside the red line, even though it's doing no harm to anyone, no one has moaned about it, we're going to remove it? I think for the reputation of this council alone, we should be wary that what people will think if we were to remove it on something that has had 500,000 people go through it to have their vaccinations because they believe it will help them. And as I said, we are woefully short of employment land. So to be flexible enough to accommodate needs and what plan, allow for new and flexible working practices, and to enable a rapid response to changes in economic circumstances. So that's the first one. The other one is 89, which planning policies and decisions should recognise that sites to meet local, this is in supporting a prosperous rural economy. Planning policies and decisions should recognise that sites to meet local businesses and community needs in rural areas may have to be found adjacent to or beyond existing settlements and in locations that are not well served by public transport. It then goes on to use the use of previously developed land and sites that are physically well related to existing settlements should be encouraged where suitable opportunities exist. Whatever the reason that this site is here, emergency or otherwise, it is there. And in my opinion, I believe that we should support this and not refuse it. So I will, when you are ready, make a proposal. And I have a strategy. I'm not sure Mr. Hunter will like it, but it is the best I could come up with with my knowledge. But I would ask officers to assist us in this because I think we are being narrow-minded and blinkered in our approach just because, I'm not being funny, it almost feels personal. We don't like this. I know that these people have previously wound officers up, and I quite understand that at the end of the day, people get annoyed about people being blasé and not obeying the rules. But this isn't one of these cases. This is a case where there was a reason for this building, and I think it should be supported. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Was anybody timing though?
Certainly weren't 3 minutes.
Jenny,
Just if he's proposing it, I'd like to second it.
I don't, yeah, we'll take that as a proposal and seconder. Thank you. Colin?
Do that. Ian, did we miss something out? 88 on the NPPF says the retention and development of accessible local services and community facilities. That is a community facility and it's accessible by bus and everything else.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure that's what they usually mean by a community facility, but yeah, well, okay. Okay, and Councillor Haggerty.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I also enjoyed my day out yesterday and the other conversations we've had about this. I'm not convinced that this building will never ever be used for the NHS. I know they've not produced anything today to say they're going to use it. I do see everybody going to get jabs everywhere and everywhere and everywhere. But if they had the opportunity to use Greendale, I think I'm told that the shops have got planning permission being refused. So that's another one you can't have a jab. Any other jabs you've got to have, whether it's flu or anything else, I know you can do them both together now. I believe the centre is actually worth keeping. And that's against what everybody may want. I went to a place yesterday to see a building, on how bad a building is on a view. All I could see yesterday was an industrial estate, which is actually where we were. Whichever way I looked, I could see an industrial estate. If this council is going to hold back an industrial estate expanding when we need it more than any other time, when we're building around it, all these places that are going up in Cranbrook, the other places that we've discussed today in Broadclyst and everywhere around it, if anything goes wrong, I cannot not see the NHS not using this building. And I think that they should be asked to produce something. I think there probably is a bit of paper somewhere that says they do want it. But I cannot see. But the last time we went up there, even when I went for a jab there, I'm sure the ground was flooding and it was on stones. And I believe they've addressed that, which is why it's concreted ground now. So I know we're supposed to say this and you're supposed to say that, and if you write this and policies for that, I really can't say. I think we're going backwards. I'd really like to know, read the rates thing, the rates that East Devon Council receive for this building. What are we spending that on? Because that is money to the people. You know, it's public money. And I think we should allow an estate like Greendale. I know strategy is saying that's the boundaries, and I think we should really look at this boundary. This is an industrial estate where and we're not saying it's 5 miles that way of an industrial estate. And if you say things you can't build on, look at Marsh Barton in Exeter. The biggest, where all the cars are, was a flood place. So, you know, how that ever got planning permission, that's got to be flood zone 3 or whatever, 4, or even 8 if you like. But this is, what we've got here is, I think it's something to keep. I'd really like to, I can't see the NHS not using it. I can also see it being possibly used as a Nightingale, because it's definitely big enough. But for me, I would support to keep it. Thank you.
Okay. In the absence of Councillor Howe, I'm just going to remind members that we should not be making up policy on the hoof, which is, some of the arguments I'm hearing are actually not just for retention of this, but actually for expansion of Greendale. So we're veering into making strategic planning decisions here. So Councillor Howe I would hope, be reminding us of that. Councillor Gazard, is that hand up?
Oh, thank you, Chair. Well, we clearly heard from our officers that this goes against policy, but should we be minded to support it? Could we put condition on that it's for a period of time, i.e. 12 months, 18 months, and then it gets revisited again. Because I'm not sure whether or not we're going to, the NHS will want to use it. As I said earlier, I can only speak for my own surgery. I keep getting texts every day saying, would I like to come in and have my COVID jab? Would I like to come and have my flu jab? And I know my colleague here said that's not happening at her surgery, but
No, they're full.
yeah. But I just wondering, can we put a time limit on it? I mean, because I think we've had a long debate on this, and it is beginning to get a bit emotive, and I understand that. What was that? And I fully understand that, but could you just give me an answer to that question, please?
Yes, I can. In this instance, I don't think there would be any merit in granting what would actually be a further temporary consent, because obviously it was built under temporary COVID. We granted a further year temporary consent. The purpose of temporary consents is normally to assess the impacts of of something and sort of test it out. How, I mean, what are the impacts going to be? I mean, if it's a farm worker's dwelling, is there actually going to be a viable business? In this instance, I think we can all see what the impacts are, and also the proposal for this being an NHS surge centre means that it may well possibly not be needed for 18 months, 5 years, 10 years, however many years, because what the information we're being given is the intention is this is just for an in the case of a further pandemic, and obviously nobody knows when that may or may not occur. So I don't think this would be an appropriate situation to grant a further temporary consent.
Okay, Councillor Faithful, I think I skipped over you there.
Thank you, Chair. Well, there's two comments I'd particularly like to make. As one of the few people who actually regularly uses public transport, comments about Greendale being on a bus route. Well, if you know anything about the bus route network, you have to go on one bus to get to another bus, and then you have to wait however many minutes for the changeover. And I have never had an injection. That was the first time I've ever been to that site before. I've never been there before for an injection. I always had them somewhere else. And that place is not a convenient place for people on public transport. And a lot of elderly people are the regular users on public transport. So it's not going to get people there. They're going to have to use the car, I would suggest. There was also a comment about, actually my name mentioned, about I should look where I'm going on a bicycle. Well, I wonder if Councillor Bailey would like to have a go on riding a bicycle up a steep hill and see how long he gets to the point where he has to stop and get off and walk. And when you get off and walk, you tend to stop and get your breath back and have a look around. And you've got all the time in the world to look around because you're walking. That's one of those things one does with one's bicycle up a steep hill.
Considering your safety, as looking to where you're going, there's lots of.
Okay, let's not disappear.
Wait, I don't need a lecture on cycling. I've toured the Indian Himalayas before now.
Let's not go there.
We have got when you're out cycling and walking, you take a lot more notice than when you're in a car. Thank you, Chair.
You've made that point, and it's a good one. I totally agree with you. Councillor Anne Hall.
Thank you, Chair. If we're minded to actually accept this application, could we make a condition that it's a medical use only? I'm just thinking further outside the box of, we've got the new development coming just across the road for the new local plan. Wouldn't this make a fantastic medical centre or use of this area and kill two birds with one stone? I'm just thinking outside the box there. Thank you.
I think we already established that it would be Class E medical only, I think. Is that right?
The application is for Class E medical and health facility.
But am I right in thinking at the moment it's only for surge medical rather than medical on a daily, day-to-day basis?
So the application proposal is for the permanent use of the building and car park for Class E medical and health facility and ancillary parking. The supporting information, the justification for it, is saying that it is an NHS surge centre. So members would need to take a view, if they were minded to approve this, are they only wanting to approve it as an NHS surge centre, in which case they would need to condition it as such, or are they happy for this to be any medical or health facility available to any private hospital or any similar occupier that might want to come onto this site, or, you know, not necessarily private, but, and then bear in mind, is this a sustainable location for such uses? Because effectively, without the narrowing of the use to an NHS surge centre, it obviously does potentially open it up to a very broad range of uses. Medical and health is all sorts of things, dentists, doctors, etc., which we would normally always try to seek to put in sustainable locations within our settlements, not out of town locations on industrial estates.
Would that mean a chemist then? Could it be a chemist?
A chemist would generally be a retail shop, so I would say not a chemist, no.
All right. Councillor Barlow, is it quick?
I just wanted to make a motion so that you could actually go to a vote, Chair. Otherwise, we might be here all night going around in circles discussing.
I think
it's a great shame that we can't use this building as it was originally done, which was an emergency within a month's notice, and it could be used as a warehouse for employment. But that's irrelevant. That's what is in front of us at the moment. So I was going to, so that Mr. Damien Hunter doesn't beat me up, I was actually going to give him some of our strategies and then back up with the MPPF if you're ready for it.
Okay, I think we are.
But I was going to suggest strategy 3, sustainable.
Just hold on a moment, Ian.
So just to sort of set this off, so in terms of, I'm presuming you're going to recommend approval. So we've just said, you've acknowledged that this is a departure from the local plan. So I think what the key thing that we would need to know is what are the material circumstances that you consider justify allowing this as a departure. So the benefits of this development, effectively, that justify allowing this as a departure. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a list of strategies, policies, just a clear explanation of the reasons why you think this is an exception. This particular proposal demonstrates exceptional circumstances that justify it as a departure.
Thank you. It is an exception because it is there already. It was given temporary permission. It has been built. The carbon has been sequestered in the building. And that basically is the nub of the matter. It's not upset anyone. It's not visible. And I was going to say, as far as I'm concerned, reading it, and you may disagree, but strategy 3, prudent use of natural resources, promotion of social well-being to meet people's needs, such as healthcare, whether it's emergency in a pandemic or otherwise, and also taking E, which is taking the long-term views of our actions, ensuring that future generations live in a high-quality environment where jobs, facilities, education, and training are readily available. And then, obviously, using the MPPF, because again, should this come to appeal, we must be defended on this, which was 86, my learned friend next door to me, 88, and 89.
Okay, so I think we had a seconder, didn't we? But it was Jenny. Yeah. Wendy just.
Sorry, just to clarify, so your reason that the exceptional circumstances that you're proposing is that it's already built on and due to the carbon cost of removal, and that there's no adverse impacts arising from it. So nothing to do with the actual proposed NHS use.
Well, obviously that is there as well, but that is the reason the building was put up in the first place. So that's the reason it's there. That's what's in front of us. And that is the possible potential need. We've seen the need for it now. We don't know when the next pandemic is coming. But regardless of that, the building is already there. We declared an emergency. I keep going back to this. We declared an emergency. We declared an emergency as a council, as a country. And at the end of the day, usually in an emergency, that means you need to do immediate action. And here we are about to go against that for no reason. So, to me, the carbon, it should be, first and foremost. You've got the reason there. They've given you the reason they want to keep the building, which is obviously the reason that is in front of us now for the Surge Centre. But to me, the reason that we should stray from our policy, not because we need extra employment land, which we do, but basically because of the carbon emergency.
So I think we need to bear in mind that we had a very similar proposal with the council, time's running by, in the last year, that we refused. So we refused permission for this building for its retention. So the matters that you're raising were all relevant then. So we need to say what is materially different about this application compared to the previous application. We can't just change our minds. We can't just say, well, we've thought about it a little bit more, we've decided. We have to have a materially different situation. Now, the thing that is materially different between this scheme and the previous scheme is the previous scheme proposed a range of employment uses as well as the NHS surge capacity. This scheme proposes a different use. It narrows the use to just medical and health. So the reason for the justification really needs to be about the use, because everything else was the same. The building was still there, the carbon aspects were still there.
I believe I'm right in saying that due to our constitution, we are allowed to change our mind, but not within 6 months, because otherwise, of course, actually, we couldn't be discussing this because we did refuse it in the first place back in March. So we waited 6 months so that we could have this again, fresh. We are looking at it. It is fresh. I admit that this is a different application just for the NHS, but we could change our minds if we wanted to, because it's been over 6 months now. I believe that is correct.
Maybe Mr. Hunter will want to comment on that, but we always need to be consistent in our decision making. We made a decision very recently to refuse this, so we do need to be consistent, and we need to look and say what is materially different, or what new evidence has come to light within that period of time that enables the council to now come to a different conclusion. Now, there is a difference. This is is not the same application because the use is different. But it is therefore the use that I would advise you to be looking at as your sort of overriding reason that you might consider that this is that justifies this as a departure from the local plan and therefore something that could be supported.
I hear what you're saying. I mean, there are several things that are different as well. First of all, the landscape. We didn't go for a site view. We've been for a site view and we realised that actually the reason we failed it, one of the reasons, flooding was another one that we have now got over, because at the time we were advised that we couldn't make a condition by officers, but now we have, because we've gone out for extra advice. I admit that things are different. So there are two major things that we've refused it on that have changed. But I'm not going back to say that we should allow it for everything, because that isn't what's in front of us. I understand that it's different. You're asking me for the reasons I've given it to you, and I've given you the reasons. In my opinion, that differs, I know, from officers' opinion, but that's no different than some of the you know, when we've passed housing that goes against our local plan. We haven't done that before, but we've done it today on a couple of occasions because things have changed. So I'm not saying that this is the same as some of the housing decisions we made, but certainly we have the ability to move away from the local plan if we feel there is reason. The reason I'm giving you is, firstly, as you point out, that this is slightly different. This is for the surge centre alone, because that was one of the reasons that we didn't pass it the first time. And secondly, more importantly, as I said, is to me, is the carbon, and I argued that on the first time, and I know we voted against it then, but this is different. So there are my reasons, and I believe they are defendable. Should anyone want to appeal against it.
Okay. I've got Councillor Colin Brown. You wanted to speak?
You've got to be consistent in what you do. We had a planning application come before us that was contrary to policy for the tents, for the school, for teaching, for the children learning. That was refused a number of months earlier and went to enforcement, and then you brought it back, exactly the same policy, for approval. Totally contrary to everything in the local plan.
So that application was deemed to be materially different because it was for a special educational needs facility. So in the same way that this is, the nature of the use is materially different this time because it no longer includes the broad commercial uses. So I'm not suggesting that it's not possible to come to a different outcome today. I'm just suggesting that we focus on how this is different to the scheme that we looked at last time. And then members, they may then say that in the planning balance, the benefit to the community of having this NHS Surge Centre available for the long-term use, outweighs the landscape harm, which members have deemed to be minimal. The drainage has now been overcome. And that as such, members feel that this is something that they want to support. I'm just suggesting we just need to focus on the fact that of the materiality and the changes of the two applications.
Consistency, and I do listen to that. Could we please put BAT and B blocks along the top of it and put that as a condition that it should have that sort of thing on it as well, on the building, if we are to approve this one.
That it's only to be used as a surge facility. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Jenny Brown.
Is a seconder allowed to actually put reasons forward as helped as well to help the proposer? Am I?
Yes, that's changing what I propose. But you need to debate it.
I'm not changing what you're doing. It's just that they're asking what the proposal is. Surely the proposal is different from the one that was here before because of what they've got down as a proposal.
Okay, so you're saying it's a different application. Yeah. Councillor Mathall.
I'm not going to help you too much, Ian, because I'm struggling with this application one way or the other. But the planning barrister gave you 3 things right at the start in his presentation, which you can hang your hat on if you want. Is the plan up to date? Is the landscape protected? Those types of things.
I will be guided by officers if they would like to assist us. I think we've made it clear that we would like to go for approval.
Okay, well, we think there's enough there that it's that the flooding issue has been responded to and accepted by the Flood Authority. The landscape impact has been assessed through a site visit and considered not to be excessive, and that with the caveat that it's only used as an emergency surge centre, then the application is deemed acceptable.
I think if we do need clarity on the use, because the current proposal is for Class E medical and health facility, which would mean it could be used permanently, as I say, 24/7 as it stands. If members are only wanting to support this, if it's an NHS surge centre, then that would need to be specifically conditioned. So I think we just need to be clear as to whether the proposal is as per the current description for an open medical and health facility, or is it is just the NHS?
As it is. I mean, that's what's in front of us. Yeah.
Okay. And then the other aspect is conditions. Obviously, the general conditions, I think, would need to be agreed, but I'm hearing that it would be a request for ecological enhancements to be a scheme for ecological enhancements of the site to be submitted, agreed and implemented within a set timescale, a landscaping scheme, which would obviously probably complement the ecological enhancement, boundary treatments to be agreed for the site, obviously implementation of the drainage scheme, which would need to be within a relatively short timescale because the building is already there. And I would also propose that permitted development rights are removed such that there is the use is restricted solely to medical and health and no other use class, and any other, I suppose, general conditions which would then be agreed with the ward member in consultation with the chair.
Both ward members or?
Yes.
Two, yeah. Yeah, I've got no problems with the standard conditions.
Okay. So with those conditions in mind, and unless any members wish to suggest any others, we have a proposal to approve. So we'll go to a vote on that one. So those in favour of approval?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Okay, those against?
3.
Any abstentions? 1. Okay. Okay, in that case, that is approved. And that brings our meeting to an end. Thank you, everyone who's attended, and have a good rest of the afternoon.
Yeah.